Samuel tells it how it is in 1 Samuel chapter 12. Samuel is speaking to all of Israel when we start this chapter. And he says, I have carefully listened to everything you said to me and placed a king over you. Now you can see that the king is leading you. As for me, I am old and gray and my sons are here with you. I've led you from my youth until now. Then he goes on and says, bring any charges against me. I haven't taken anyone's ox. I haven't done anything to you. Basically, he says, I have not used my office for personal gain. And they were like, yeah, like you're right. You haven't wronged us in any way. So then he basically tells them how awesome God is. In verses 6 through 12, he talks about how he led your ancestors out of Egypt and you still disobeyed him. And he still rescued you after. In verse 14, Samuel says, if you fear the Lord, worship and obey him. And if you don't rebel against the Lord's command, then both you and the king who reigns over you will follow the Lord your God. So no king in Israel is exempt from obeying God. Then Samuel says, isn't the wheat harvest today? I will call on the Lord and he will send thunder and rain so that you will recognize what an immense evil you committed in the sight of God by requesting a king for yourselves. Samuel called upon the Lord and the Lord answered and provided, sent thunder and rain. And then the people kind of freaked out. Samuel continues with, do not be afraid. Even though you have committed all this evil, don't turn away from following the Lord. Instead, worship the Lord with all your heart. Don't turn away to follow worthless things that can't profit or rescue you. They are worthless. The Lord will not abandon his people because of his great name and because he has determined to make you his own people. And this is still true today. God will not forsake you. He will not forsake us even when we sin. God does not leave us dead in our sin, but reconciles us through Christ. Saul loses his kingship in 1 Samuel chapter 13. We see an attack from the Philistines here. And where Saul goes wrong, this starts in verse 8 through verse 15 is Saul offers, he says, I thought the Philistines will now descend on me, and I haven't sought the Lord's favor. So I forced myself to offer the burnt offering. He was waiting for Samuel. Samuel did not come at the right time. He was a little bit late when they were meeting up during a battle. And so Saul fails to acknowledge that the prophet has a higher role as God's messenger. Thank you, Jesus, that we don't need to worry about that now. He loses his kingship because of his disobedience. Samuel didn't come in his appointed time. His troops were starting to desert him. He was freaking out. He wasn't trusting in God. He made a poor decision and he lost his kingship for it. There was also no blacksmith to be found in Israel. The Philistines were able to take over the production of metal that was used for swords and spears. So it's clear that this battle was won because of God and not because of man's doing. There is a lot going on in 1 Samuel chapter 14. So let's try our best to break this down. Chapter 14 starts off with Jonathan, that is one of Saul's sons. And verses 1 through 14 are about his victory over the Philistines because he trusted in God. Basically, Jonathan snuck off with a weapons keeper, and they trusted in God by saying, Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, come, let us cross over the garrison of these uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will help us. Nothing can keep the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Now, uncircumcised was kind of an insult to the Philistines. So he trusted in God to know whether he should proceed or not. in verse 10, it says, "But if they say, 'Come on up,' then we will go up, because the Lord has handed them over to us. That will be our sign." And of course they do. They say, "Come on up and we will teach you a lesson." And Jonathan said, "Follow me, for the Lord has handed them over to Israel." And Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet with his armor bearer behind him. And Jonathan cut them down, and his armor bearer followed and finished them off. A panic of God, or my CSB version says terror spread, but my study Bible says this is a panic of God, spread through the Philistine camp and open fields to the troops. Philistines are freaking out. Now, there were Hebrews from an area who had gone in earlier into the camp to join the Philistines, but when they saw that the Israelites were succeeding, they were winning the battle, they decided to fight for Israel. Then there were Israelites that were in hiding because of the war, and they came out and supported Israel as well. And verse 23 says, "So the Lord saved Israel that day." And the next section of this long chapter is Saul's rush oath. Basically, everyone was really, really exhausted, but Saul said, "Anyone who eats today is cursed." And his son Jonathan scoops up some honey and eats it. Then when the Israelites could eat again, they were so exhausted, they were so hungry that they ate meat with blood still in it. And Genesis 9 verse 4 and Leviticus 17 talks about how that is a big no-no. And because I'm running out of time, Saul gives it to God. There's stones involved, a positive stone, a negative stone, a yes or a no. The people end up saving Jonathan from death, and we move on.